like a glove. Hello everyone, this is John Joy in a Garbage Core, and I am here today to answer the #1 burning question on everyone's minds, keeping everyone awake at night. In Cyberpunk 2077, can you use a steering wheel? Short answer, no. Thanks for watching, hit like and subscribe. Hi John, this is the editor, John, and this is a terrible joke, and you know it. The answer is actually yes, though there is a bit of work involved. Fortunately, if you're actually curious to get this working and potentially getting to work with other games, I've already gone through most of the heavy work for you. I'll go through the main setup step by step. I'll also go through some tweaks we can do in-game to make it actually usable, though you may still have some trouble walking it forward. Get it? That was a... Never mind. Hi, John. This is the editor, John. You know, I gotta ask, why do you write this? Also, what is this about rolling the intro? We're already almost a minute in, and we're gonna be losing audience retention. Frankly, we don't have the fucking budget for this. I mean... Okay, so this one's actually kind of long, so there are timestamps in the description if you want to skip specific parts. But as a disclaimer, these instructions are basically utilizing third-party software and a mod that are currently in alpha, so your mileage may vary if you choose to use them. Don't expect it to work the first time. This is mostly a for fun tinkering / messing about. This channel is also more part-time hobby, so while I will try to help or answer questions, please know it may take a minute. I'm still learning too. Also, for some reason, John Join uses the word power slide a little more frequently than he really should in the off-script sections, for which I apologize profusely. He is something of an idiot. So, with that out of the way, let's get into it. So, since the game itself does have built-in support for real PlayStation and Xbox controllers, our primary strategy is to get our real wheel controller and joystick recognized as a standard PlayStation or Xbox controller by the game. So the main thing making this possible is an app called Universal Control Remapper, or UCR for short, and a couple additional drivers it supports. They're all free, though UCR itself is still in alpha, so be warned. So in total, you'll need to download and install the following: the Universal Control Remapper to map out and hook up everything, the vGem, VIGEM, to act as the virtual PS4 and 360 controller we plug in to be recognized by the game, and vJoy to act as both a middleman between your real controllers and as a mixer to feed in multiple real controllers. In other words, my wheel and pedal set and a joystick, without blowing up the actual game we're sending this to. Hey, editing John, jumping back in here. So the setup of these items I left out of this walkthrough because it's kind of a little self-explanatory on those specific pages, but if anyone wants a more detailed walkthrough on this and on this setup as well as just generally mapping stuff in UCR in general, just let me know and I'll probably do a more detailed walkthrough of these specific ones. Okay, all right, back to it. So, as a side note, if you use the Logitech Wheel, I have had some trouble in the past where after installing vJoy, Logitech G Hub won't recognize my wheel. It shows up as disconnected in the UI and ends up locking the wheel in place, so I can't even move it. So if you run into this issue, a rather strange workaround is to unplug your wheel and just plug it into a different USB port. I mean, don't ask me why or how I learned this worked. It just does. And I think it might have something to do with how vJoy interacts with other drivers, but that is far beyond the scope of this tutorial. In fact, this has reoccurred to me when Logitech pushed out a G-Hub update just before writing this. So if it appears disconnected in G-Hub, just unplug and try another port. So as of writing, UCR does not have built-in profile export or import capabilities. It's in early alpha, it's probably worked on for free, all that. But this is actually a pretty relatively easy copy pasta. So UCR looks at and writes its profile mappings to a single XML file. I've uploaded and linked the XML of my profile below to kind of save you some of the grunt work. So if you've gone ahead and downloaded one of these profiles already, this will kind of come up. So step one, to import my profile, just download and open the file. You can use Notepad. Here I'm using Notepad++. It's kind of just preference. For now, and once you open it up, you can kind of look through, but it's not really necessary. It's really just a text file. So put this to the side for now. And one, make sure UCR is not running. So in a directory where you've deployed UCR, find the file labeled context.xml. If this file doesn't exist already, just go ahead and just pop open UCR and it'll automatically create the file for you. So you open this in Notepad or Notepad++, and you find the elements, the end element of profiles here. This is basically all of the profiles that are in there. And what you do is then copy and paste the entirety of my profile into this new line. You can do that by just Control select all, right click, copy, or Control A, Control C, as you always. And you want to go back into this context.xml file, put this at the very end of whatever you might have, just make sure that it's within the profiles element, paste it in, hit save, or Control S to save, just go ahead and save that. Go ahead and close that, then open up UCR. It might take a second, but the profile I just put in should have already come in. Now, I haven't tried having other people import profiles from me before. I'm just using this on a separate computer. So if something does go horribly wrong, leave me a comment and I'll try to help you out and update this as necessary. Okay, so now the fun part, or the not so fun part. So we're going to go ahead and map your particular wheel and your joystick as a handbrake, if you're feeling particularly mad. So what we're going to do, the way we go about this is just go ahead and map everything to the child profile. So I'm just going to go ahead and expand this real quick. So we've got our activated map me, this child profile of the actual parent profile. You want to select that, and in the right-hand side under input devices, you're going to go ahead and delete out whatever happens to already be there. And so just for demonstration, I'm just going to go ahead and remap my Wingman StrikeForce 3D, my joystick, real quick. Just go ahead and the little trash can icon up there. And then add your joystick in by clicking this plus button, and up pops this add input devices. Ignore the lots that I've got over here, but scroll down and find whatever you want to map into. Wingman StrikeForce 3D. You can also map in all your devices all at once if you wanted to. I've got my wheel somewhere around here. I swear. And once that's added in, and remember to save often because this app is still in alpha and it tends to crash. Oftentimes if your stuff isn't plugged in, or when you're just modifying it sometimes. But in any case, once you've added in all your input devices, go ahead and edit the profile by either clicking this icon over here or just double clicking the profile. And go ahead and edit, open it up for editing. Now, when you go in, the tedious bit, you're going to have to go through each function and use UCR to replace the input mapping with whatever your controllers are. So I've labeled each function to sort of tell what they'll eventually get mapped to on the virtual controller up in the parent profile. But I've also linked a text file showing the full map. It might be easier to look at than in UCR. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and expand this a little bit. So, and remember, save often because UCR is still in alpha. And there are times when sometimes well, you'll see in a minute. So under each mapping, you're going to want to look at input, and this drop-down menu actually corresponds to the actual device that you're actually passing in. So if you click on it, it will show you all the input devices that we all selected earlier. I'm going to go ahead and select my joystick. Now this is an important thing. Some cases, as I was recording this, I was trying to actually, pass in just by clicking on this button. Sometimes you don't want to do that because depending on your devices, it might actually crash UCR. I don't really know why, but, everybody's setup is differently. In my case, I'm just going to go ahead and reset it back to the Y-axis. And it'll reset itself back to that. And if I go ahead and hit save, it'll actually go ahead and close it in. For the other ones, so for instance, my Logitech G29, I can go ahead and actually just add this, for these buttons, you can go ahead and actually click this one. and then you see it'll press input device. I'm going to go ahead and press the cross button on my wheel, and that actually will map it to the actual control. Same with, and so you're going to want to do this with all these buttons. It will also allow you, assuming your pedals are actually plugged in, to actually map the actual wheel, right? So under 2 vJoy X, left stick X-axis, I have the axis over here. You can click this, press input device, and you just turn your wheel, and it automatically maps for you. Assuming it doesn't just crash on you, but, you know, it's an alpha. Basically, you want to go through and go ahead and map your controls as necessary. Same thing with your trigger over here. I'm going to go ahead and... This is mapped to axis Y, but after you've gone ahead and selected that, you can click this and press your pedal over there, right? So again, this is still an alpha, so things may go awry. Also, UCR sometimes glitches out if you open this profile without your device plugged in, as your humble tech writer learned while writing this tutorial. Nothing's lost. Simply close down, restart UCR if this happens, and it should be fine so, with all your devices plugged in, okay? So give that a whirl, and then we're going to see you on the other side of this, all right? Hi, Ed and John popping back in again. So if you're using version 2 of the profiles, you might notice while you're mapping buttons of mapping labeled toggle steering anti-dead zone, you'll want to map this to a button you're not using as part of your writer control mapping. So for instance, I use the G29's enter button by default. You'll use this when swapping to and from mouse and keyboard, so the game UI doesn't flicker as much when you're on foot and using mouse and keyboard, but you can toggle it on when you're driving for better steering. This will make more sense later when we talk about in-game tweaking, but I just want to point that out now. Anyway, back at it. Okay, you done? Okay. So to test it out, either once you're as you're doing this, or as once you're all finished, you can hit this play button to actually activate it. And you can do this either over on the main screen with the actual child profile selected and hit the play button, or you can go ahead and do it on the actual edit profile itself. So I've clicked it, and you might have heard a USB sound over there. And in fact, if you have Steam loaded, the actual, it will actually pop up that says that PlayStation 4 controller inputs were loaded in. And another way you can actually check out that got in is to look up the app you might have seen there, Monitor vJoy. And this is effectively showing you the middleman that's actually going on here. As you can see, I'm pressing on my pedals, pushing a few buttons, and the appropriate buttons that they're actually mapped to are lining up. So that's all good. And pretty much that's about it. If you need to change anything, just go ahead and hit stop. And basically your virtual controller will actually disable, and then you can go ahead and modify that one. So note, if it's not working, double check that you have vJoy turned on. So to do so, if you don't have it already, you can look up configured vJoy. I've already got it open up here, and make sure that this box is checked. Again, if something crashes or anything else like that, that's probably the source of that. It's pretty safe to disable vJoy when you're not using it and nothing's actually reading from it, like UCR. Though, so I do recommend that you actually stop UCR and go ahead and close it down when you do. If it's still not working, remember to activate the child profile. The child profile, he said, not the parent profile over here. Basically, the way it works is that the virtual controller will turn on and be recognized, but your inputs won't be going to vJoy, and thus your real controllers won't actually do anything. And so with all that being said, we can get in game and just hopefully see how it works, right? Hey, Ed and John popping back in again. So the following recording was done for the version 1 of my profiles, but since then I've made a version 2, which adds a new function to deal with the in-game dead zone a bit better. You might have noticed as well your mapping buttons, but it will still use the same methods I'm about to describe to fine-tune it. If you're already trying out version 2, just swap out the numbers for each settings demonstrated with those I recommend for V2. They'll be later in the video as well as in the description. Okay. Okay, so for me, some reason, as soon as you load up in the game and you, with the UCR profile activated, your DSR finally working, for some reason my game only shows UI inputs for an Xbox controller, right? You still have like, press the back button to continue, or the menu button. If you're familiar with those controls already, it should be easy. I don't know if it's like particular on this one, but I'm gonna go ahead and hit my option button, since I've got that actually mapped to the back button. But yeah, you'll notice like A and right bumper is the assigned controls and everything. But, you know, again, I think it's just something to get used to. I don't know if it's something to do particularly with my setup or whether the game even has it, but kind of works for me. Take a moment to just appreciate these things. Well, here we are. As you can see, we do have some movement in the left and right axis. However, it is kind of not really spec'd out for, I mean, left trigger, you know. Anyway, let's actually call it a vehicle, and let's actually get to what we were actually here for. It's gonna start coming anywhere. I can only move left and right, so this is gonna be kind of funny. Fortunately though, you might have noticed, it's actually pretty easy to swap back to, interesting sound effect. It is quite easy to actually swap back and forth between keyboard and controller, which actually makes this kind of a little bit possible. First things first, you can go ahead and actually test out some of your stuff that you have mapped, right? So I've kind of have my brake pedal actually mapped, so I can actually go ahead and do reverse, and my right trigger mapped to my actual accelerator, so I can actually accelerate. However, you might notice the steering on mine is a little off. And the handbrake still works too. However, so obviously this steering is not going to work very well for us, but there might be an easy way to do this. So for mine, my setup anyways, I know I can actually change my steering wheel range down to something that actually matches kind of the range of the actual control stick, right? So right now it's using the full range of about 900. This might actually this might actually be different for your particular wheel setup. I'm gonna go ahead and Alt-Tab out to, I've already got my Logitech G hub kind of set up here. If you don't actually see it right over here, you can actually go in, create a profile if necessary, really. We're only just doing a small tweak. But you want to go in here, and then under the steering wheel, select the operating range, and jet that down to maybe around 200 is what 200 and 550 is usually what I play around with. And by the way, before you actually assign this, pretty good to get your wheel centered, or kind of clear it before you do. This is demonstration. Because if you do this, your wheel will automatically recenter itself after you release it. So I'm going to set this down to 200, and you'll see why in a second. So yeah, keep it clear before you do that. Anyways, so now we are actually locking the wheel from the actual hardware itself, right? The driver itself. So it won't allow us to drive past there, which actually narrows it down to kind of a, like I was saying, a steering range that actually maps the actual controller. Unfortunately, this game, I mean, it's not really built specifically for The Sims, so even if it could handle full steering, it's just not very conducive to what it is. There's kind of a massive, there is kind of a bit of a dead zone, which we can sort of mitigate a little bit from default settings. Next tweak we're going to do is actually kind of try to do something a little bit about that dead zone. I've reset most of my settings to stock, going over to the control settings. And so we're actually now, first up, we have these inner and outer dead zones. These largely map to, inner at least is the minimum you have to move it before the, before actual input is recognized. Now you don't want this too low, even though there is kind of a dead zone even if we do set this all the way to 0, but you can actually set this to something a little bit lower if you want. So let's set that to maybe 1.01. Same with our dead zone. We want this to actually be kind of actually low, so kind of similar to that one. That'll give us a little bit of the range actually back. And then that will allow us to actually use a little bit more of our actual gradient. And then you can go ahead and set those and then play around with it as you will. Now it still is a little sensitive, right? Kind of a slightly obtuse setting. I actually set this. We can actually change the actual setting of the steering itself. However, strangely enough, and this is actually, I found this on a Reddit post at some point. I'll have to throw in the link when I do get the chance. But this setting is actually under the third-person camera for a controller, of course, because we are using the controller. So you notice this is set up to 10. It's recommended to kind of set this at maybe 5 or 4 if you're using regular controllers. Personally, I like to set it down all the way to 1. And that actually kind of plays around with the actual setting, with the actual sensitivity. It makes it a little bit easier to actually control. The wheels still handle, the cars still kind of handle a little bit funny, right? But you know, I think it's definitely definitely a bit of an improvement, a little bit. But going back to that real quick again, though, too, there is also another setting called response curve. Mapping the raw controller inputs onto a curve before applying sensitivity. I played around with the recommended, just here. Actually, I have been using raw. It's hard to say at this point personally whether there's much of a difference. But you definitely get a feel for whichever works for you, and really a lot of it is kind of just playing around, getting more comfortable with it. Again, I'm also not the greatest driver, so this might also not be a great representation of skills or the full potential that you can go about tweaking. But you know, again, a lot of this is kind of just setting it up for experimentation and playing around with it, really. Let's see if I can actually pull off a power slide, though, right? Think where do you want to go? Nope. Yeah. Okay. All right. So, as you might have noticed, the cars still handle a little bit funny. And what I kind of want to do next, actually, is actually try out a mod that actually came out pretty shortly. Actually, and you probably have already heard about this if you found this video. Hey Judy. But that will actually allow us to actually apply a little bit more actual physics to it. So no just stopping on a dime and all that, but you know, maybe import a little bit more of your actual muscle memory, right? Hey, Eddie and John popping back in here before we do that. So since recording this bit, as mentioned, I have found a way to use anti-deadzone to bypass the game's built-in dead zone. For this, you will want to actually use the V2 version of either profile. Unfortunately, if you swap to mouse and keyboard while using this, you'll notice some flickering in control hints, etc., even if you leave your wheel centered. So as workaround, as mentioned, I mapped a function to a free button, my G29's enter button, to toggle the anti-dead zone on and off. So toggle it on when you're driving and toggle it off when you want to swap back to mouse and keyboard controls. But in addition, you'll need to tweak both your wheel range and your dead zone accordingly. So I recommend a wheel range limit of 450 degrees and an inner dead zone of 0.04. The inner dead zone you should calibrate for the anti-dead zone turned on. Since we're with it on, the steering is much more sensitive. As mentioned, I've included settings for both profiles in the description, so try out both, experiment, and tweak to your heart's content. Okay, so I'm on the Nexus mods, and I'm over at the mod Better Vehicle Handling created by RB. Kind of looking at this, you can kind of get a sense of what it is. It's a .ini configuration file to try to make the feeling of cars and bikes a little less frustrating. The version that I use is actually 0.3. It's going to be actually a 7-zip file, so if you don't have it already, you'll probably want 7-zip for this one. I've already got it downloaded, so I'll open it up real quick here. Kind of give you a sense of what you're looking at. So this folder you actually drag directly in there. But an interesting thing to note, because it's actually just config files, we can just open this up in Notepad, and it'll actually kind of show you kind of the settings that it actually sets here. You know, enable air resistance, restrain. Apparently that's actually a CD Projekt Red typo just built in there, but no big deal. But yeah, lots of these different settings that are actually interesting. You know, enable low velocity stop resistance. Set to false, which I presume, at least just from my own testing, it actually makes it so your vehicles aren't stopping on a dime. So it's more like actual, you know, when you brake, it actually takes a while for it to go in. But anyways, once you download that in, it's going to end up over here. I've kind of opened up my actual Steam library. In the directory for Cyberpunk, I actually already have it over here. And pretty much, you're just dropping that right in here. If you just drag the actual folder in there as the installation goes, it'll be fine. And so with that, let's actually go ahead and boot in again and see how that goes. Let's see how this the new mod handles actually a little bit. So again, it's kind of hard to kind of just demonstrate, I guess, with just showing it, you know. But already it kind of just feels a little bit just that much better. You know, not a super dramatic effect. I mean, a lot of it kind of just comes down to just how the controls are kind of mapped in further, perhaps in the settings, I guess. For instance, what is kind of nice is it actually does take a while to brake, so actually it's just a little bit more, taking a little bit more of maybe any real-world driving experience, theoretically. Yeah, I'm gonna try to focus here, try to actually pull up some sweet slides. I don't know, we'll see. But yeah, pretty much after this, it's kind of, you're kind of set down to go. I did not take it as adventurous as I thought I was going to be. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it, I think, is kind of just sitting down right now and just kind of tweaking with it as you're getting kind of used to the new settings, if you will. Oh, I did it. Hey! Yeah, there's a power slide. Now let's see if I can actually pull it off properly. A lot of it kind of just going back and kind of setting some things and testing them out. But you can kind of play around with sensitive and see how that, which I think will be fine, he said as he sideswiped somebody. That was bad! Oh, well, that wasn't it. So yeah, vehicles handle a little more realistically, so that power slide.
Another motherfucker trying to kill me!
Yeah, I'm going the wrong way. There we go. Well, you've become a better driver, I think. I will say the funny thing about AI traffic in this game, though, is that they're not very self-preservation. And I guess neither am I, really, but, Drive faster. Come on. Alright, So I talked this all to death even without mentioning the possibilities of mapping Tobii eye trackers, so let's close this out over some bike testing footage, shall we? So test your pedals and wheels and optional joystick as handbrake out and change settings until you feel comfortable and have fun. You know, as mentioned, I do recommend having a keyboard and mouse handy since you won't have any way to move forward while walking or a way to move your view around, unless you map it yourself. But this game is pretty slick with swapping between taking controller and keyboard mouse inputs, making this pretty seamless if a bit inconvenient. Like for example, my setup in particular has me kind of awkwardly reaching over the wheel to get at my keyboard, but it's not the worst thing in the world. And you know, I thought about mapping additional controls that would actually try and play even on foot solely with these controllers, but you know, that might come later. And that's about it. As you might have noticed, UCR opens up a lot of possibilities in games that I haven't even touched on here. You can even use this profile or others you set up in UCR with other games that normally only use Xbox or PlayStation controllers, whether they have driving or not. So try it out in other games, experiment, and have fun. So this is John joining Garbage Core. I do hope you have a wonderful day or evening and hope this finds you safe, happy, and well. Bye.